Well, we're live. I'm waiting for my guest, Harry Duran, who's a very influential and famous podcast producer. I want to hear about his whole story and his very interesting life, how he got to this country, everything else. Also, this is a good time to just start telling everyone that reshapingjustice.org is now on its way to receiving a 501c3. We've paid the fees, we've done everything for the wonderful help of Gretchen Russell to make that all happen. And we're just excited to see how that comes together and those things start to form because we want to get this podcast back on the air and able to help a lot more people. And so the idea of reshaping justice is there's so many people in the system that are just so completely hurt by the American justice system. It's still the best system in the world. I wouldn't have it any other way. But there's so many people that suffer abuse and neglect in the terms of what's going on. And there's Harry. There he is. I can hear you fine. Let's get you on the screen. Look how professional I look. There we are. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm wonderful. So anyway, I want to start by saying that you've been my friend for several years and you've been helping a lot in this whole podcast production thing. And so kind of go back to your start. How did you get your start? Where did you get your start?
Uh, when it came to podcasting, I started in 2014 because I went to a conference called New Media Expo,
Right?
and
Why?
um, I was looking to learn how to start a podcast.
Uh-huh.
And I was working on a mobile app, and I um, thought I'd go to learn there so I could promote the mobile app.
Now was that where but that's not where you ended. So how did you continue your journey?
Um, I started my own show called Podcast Junkies.
Right?
It's a bit meta to show where I interview other podcasters.
Yes.
Then I learned I had to hire a business coach because there was a lot about digital marketing that I didn't know. So I was coming from
Okay.
my 9 to 5 world. I worked at JP Morgan Chase and E Trade.
Right.
And then um, after that, that's where I came up with the idea for Fullcast, our production agency. So it's a
Right.
full service done for you agency. And I started, um, at the time I paid a coach like $1,500 a month and learning a lot about how people were building like 6 and 7 figure businesses
Right.
completely online and learned the idea of being around people who are smarter than you.
That's a good idea. That definitely
Uh,
is.
Jim Rohn is a famous speaker. He says you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Right.
And if and then a friend of mine said one time that I heard that I thought was interesting. He said, "If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room."
That's the best advice I've heard in a while. That's
So
good.
yeah, all those things to kind of give me the spark
Right.
to yeah try to push myself out of my comfort zone.
Well, and I really have enjoyed your services in helping out with the reshaping justice thing. But first, let's go back to how you got to this country. Tell me your story.
I grew up in I was born in El Salvador, and then
Right.
came here when I was a year old, and then I
Right.
grew up in Yonkers, New York, which is just
Okay.
outside New York City. So
Right.
it's just north of the Bronx, and lived there for almost all my life. And then I've also lived in Los Angeles and
Okay.
Atlanta, and so a couple of different
and
cities.
now, and now a very
Minneapolis,
cold place. Yes.
yeah, now Minneapolis.
uh, and how has that been?
It's good. It's just a different change of pace, change of scenery. Obviously, getting used to the cold, but just a different way of life as well. Because I've only lived in,
Sure.
for the most part, big cities,
Uh,
and I think with everything that's happening with COVID as well, I think it's um, just figuring out what it's a good opportunity to get work done. And so I'm working on some big projects related to my business. And I mean, if you can't get a major project done during a pandemic, then when are you going to get one?
yes. You're never going to get one done,
Yeah, exactly.
definitely. Well, and that's probably a good time to start talking about the stories we've told on Reshaping Justice and what we're going to do with that. And I've been able to get a 501c3. We've got that stuff. We're getting the approval, and so I just have liked your involvement. But what's next for Reshaping Justice?
Well, I think, we've launched the show, and so I think
Right?
next steps would be to think about whose stories you want to tell,
Absolutely.
and then also why those stories are important, because we've talked about this before, that you it's one thing to just have an interview with somebody on the show, but in order to pull the listener in, you have to actually provide some context about why you, Dale, think
Yes.
this is show is important, why you think this topic is important,
Right.
and then for each episode with each guest, I think providing the context to pull the listener into the story, because people's attention span is so short nowadays. So while the title may be enough to get them to listen,
Right.
I think how you position and introduce each guest is going to be really important,
Yes.
so they feel a connection and they feel like they have a reason for wanting to listen to that specific episode.
Right. And that's one of the things that you've helped me do is just know like how important each one of these things is. And I really enjoy your involvement in this project. And I just think that we got a lot of stuff to do. It's been a
Yeah.
slow process, but there's a lot of good stuff to tell because in my opinion, there's so much injustice still in our wonderful American justice system. So many
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah, and I think humanizing the guests is
Right.
something that that I know that you mentioned as your objective,
Yes.
um, and also there may be opportunities to do follow-ups, because some of these the guests are obviously in the prison system, and it would be nice down the line to revisit them 6 months, a year later, and just see what's
Oh,
happened, because
absolutely. Yes.
people want to know, like, and with some of these stories, they're real people, with real problems, and I think it'll be helpful for people to have some hope that some of the work that's being done is making a difference.
Going somewhere. Yes.
Yeah.
Making a difference. And so now, what's next for the podcast industry, in your opinion?
There's a lot of interest in audio tools. There's a new tool called Clubhouse that's
Oh,
where
yeah.
people are listening in. So it's an interesting way for people to get their feet wet with the audio space, because it's not that easy to record a room. There's no equipment needed. People could just be on their phones,
Right.
and it's in sort of the ephemeral nature of the conversation. So I think there could be a way to start some initial interest in the topic if you title the a room reshaping the judicial system or
Right.
incarceration system or something like that,
Uh,
you would get people in there to start talking about the topic, and then
that's
you could
fun.
redirect them to the podcast and say, hey, we have these longer form conversations and interviews
Right.
on the podcast. So that's something that's interesting that's happening in the podcasting space. But the industry doesn't show any signs of slowing down.
Not
There's
at
lots of
all.
investment coming in,
Not at
and
all.
I think it's the nature of how people consume content, because you don't have to be in front of a screen,
Right.
and you're if you tell a good story, then inevitably things will get back to the point where people have some sort of commute, or are getting out and about more. So I think people
Right.
who take advantage of this time now to create shows that start to build up an audience,
Right.
it'll pay off. You'll see that payoff as things starts to open up and people get to moving more.
Yes. How about the whole justice system with the stuff in Minneapolis? How's your involvement in that stuff gone?
I'm not as involved in the day to day. I just kind of watching what's happening. I know there's some interest. Obviously, this was the site of
Right.
George
Yes.
Floyd,
The big
and
the
sort of
big site.
ground zero. So I think
Right.
there is a lot of talk about how to reorganize the police, and how that the
Yeah.
future of that might look. So
Uh,
I do get the sense there are a lot of eyes on Minneapolis, because it's sort of where some of these efforts are being spearheaded. But I think trying to attach it to a slogan like defund the police, I think doesn't do the movement
right.
justice, because it's a polarizing phrase, and people will decide if they just want to be on one side of it or another. And I don't think,
Right.
and you having been in this system for much longer than I have,
Yes.
you know that things are not black and white. There's a lot of gray in there.
Exactly. They're not at all. And that's why I like reshaping justice. It's like finding a different version for what everybody thinks is just, because so many of the things, both from people that did the crimes and did do the crimes, it's just so unfair in the system, and it just throws people away, and I don't appreciate that at all.
Yeah. And it may be an opportunity to even ask the question what people's definition of justice is.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, there's a whole lot of places to take this and a whole lot of things to do, but that's why I'm so glad to have you on this amazing team. And I want to get you and I tell you all the things we're doing. It's all come together.
And so what's next in terms of people you're thinking about for the next couple of episodes lined up?
Well, definitely, I really still want to continue with telling the story of both Patrick Flaherty and Jamie Dunn, and so we'll continue to talk to them. I hold my phone up to the computer and make the sound that way because that's the only way we've been able to do it. But
Yeah.
you know, the deal is, I still think that their stories are so heartbreaking in terms of
Mhm.
the stuff that the American judicial system is throwing away these young people's lives and just acting like they don't matter. And that should never be. And that's why I'm involved in this. That's why I want to see this change.
Yeah, and I think the more people and the podcast is the opportunity to tell the longer form story, and obviously we get it edited, so we can figure out how to
Right.
continue to tell their story. But I
Uh,
think once the other part of it that's is something to work on is thinking about other ideas where you can share maybe snippets of the story
oh, yeah.
or point people to the podcast. I think would be
Right. Like in terms of like the stuff that people do with reshaping or redoing content,
yeah,
reusing content.
repurposing. Yeah, because you have
Yes.
once you have it in a spoken form, you can do a transcription.
Right.
Take snippets of quotes mentioned in the show, and you can share those on various platforms.
Right.
Because there's people like to consume content in different formats, and so there could be people who are older generation that maybe we could get the transcript done and feel if people like want to read the stories that are happening as
Right.
well.
And that's part of, like, you helped me set up a website for reshapingjustice.org. And so that's a good place to let people know to go to
Exactly.
start out with. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay.
anyway, I just love it. And thank you so much for your help. Appreciate
Yeah.
it so much.
Look forward. I'm working on it together with you, Dale.
Yes, absolutely, man. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Thanks, Dale.
Okay. Bye. Let's get this offline here. There we